The bridge of the Kethvar destroyer Isikinal hummed with anticipation as the sensor readings flickered across the main display. Commander Vextai's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the massive human vessel hanging motionless in the void, its hull scarred and blackened by what appeared to be catastrophic damage. Analysis complete, Commander, his sensor officer reported, mandibles clicking with excitement. The human ship shows no energy signatures. Life support is offline. No movement detected anywhere within the vessel. Vextai felt his breathing slits flutter with satisfaction. After 3 years of devastating losses to human forces across the Outer Rim, the Kethvar Empire had finally caught a break. The humans were renowned throughout the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency in combat, their unwillingness to surrender, and their disturbing tendency to win battles they had no right to survive. Every military commander in known space had heard the stories. Human crews fighting to the last breath, turning their own ships into weapons when defeat became inevitable. But this ship was different. This ship was dead. Designation? Vextai asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had clawed his way up through the ranks during the bloodiest war in Kethvar history. UES Prometheus, the sensor officer replied. Destroyer class. Crew complement approximately 400, according to our intelligence files. It went missing 6 months ago during the Battle of Kepler Station. Vextai's chest swelled with pride. The Prometheus had been one of humanity's most effective warships, responsible for the destruction of at least 12 Kethvar vessels during the campaign. Its captain, Sarah Chun, was listed among the Empire's most wanted war criminals. The bounty on her head alone would fund a small fleet. Sir, his tactical officer interrupted, we're detecting significant structural damage to the forward sections. Hull breaches on multiple decks. It appears they took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. Survivors? Vextai asked, though he already knew the answer. None detected, Commander. Internal atmosphere has been vented to space. The ship has been drifting dead for months. Vextai allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. After watching too many of his fellow commanders die at human hands, he would finally have the honor of claiming a victory against these persistent pests. The Prometheus would be stripped of its technology, its crew's bodies displayed as trophies, and its reputation would die with it. Prepare a boarding party, he ordered. I want a full salvage team, engineers, technicians, and security. We'll take everything of value. Commander, his second-in-command, Subcommander Krixta, stepped forward. Perhaps we should be more cautious. The humans have been known to... To what? Vextai cut him off. Fight back from the grave? The ship is dead. Krixta. Their famous stubbornness means nothing when they're floating frozen in space. The boarding party assembled in the docking bay within an hour. 30 of the Empire's finest warriors, equipped with the latest in Kethvar military technology. Pulse rifles, energy shields, atmospheric suits capable of operating in the vacuum of space. They were prepared for anything, except what they would actually find. As the assault shuttle approached the human vessel, Vextai studied the damage through the viewport. The Prometheus was huge, nearly twice the size of his own destroyer. Its angular human design looked brutal even in death, all harsh lines and weapon ports. Scorch marks along the hull told the story of its final battle, and several sections have been blown completely open to space. Docking in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. Vextai checked his weapon one final time. The pulse rifle felt solid in his 3-finger grip, its power cells showing full charge. Around him, his warriors made their own preparations, their excitement palpable. This would be the first time any of them had set foot on a human vessel. The shuttle connected with an airlock on the Prometheus's port side with metallic clang. Vextai's engineer quickly began working on the locking mechanism, his tools sparking as they cut through the human design systems. Atmosphere beyond the airlock is completely vented. The engineer reported, no pressure, no oxygen. The ship is definitely dead. Excellent. Vextai activated his suit's communication system. All teams, remember your objectives. Technology goes to the engineers. Weapons to tactical analysis. And any human bodies go to intelligence. This is a historic moment. The first time the Kethvar Empire has successfully captured a human warship. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond lay a corridor that stretched into darkness, lit only by the emergency lighting from their suits. The walls were covered in a strange, organic-looking material that seemed to shift and pulse in the beam of their lights. "Strange," one of the engineers muttered. "This interior design isn't in any of our intelligence files." Vextai dismissed the observation. Human technology was always evolving, always adapting. It was one of the reasons they were so dangerous. But evolution required living beings, and there were no living beings left on this ship. "Form up," he ordered. "Standard search pattern. Team Alpha takes the bridge. Team Beta secures engineering. Team Gamma handles crew quarters. We have 6 hours before the next patrol cycle." As they moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoed strangely in the empty corridors. The walls seemed to absorb sound in ways that made conversation feel muffled and distant. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting dancing shadows that made the organic-looking wall covering seem almost alive. "Commander," one of his warriors called out, "we're detecting some unusual readings on the atmospheric scanners." "Define unusual," Vextai replied, pausing to examine a doorway that had been sealed with what appeared to be metallic foam. "Trace amount of oxygen in some sections, and the temperature readings are inconsistent with a dead ship. Some areas are showing near-normal atmospheric conditions." Vextai felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. Damaged life support systems often produced irregular readings. The important thing was that there were no life signs, no movement, no signs of active resistance. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "We proceed as planned." Behind them, the airlock sealed itself with a soft click that none of them noticed. In the darkness of the corridor they had just left, something that might have been a wall panel slid silently aside. For just a moment, a pair of very human eyes observed the retreating aliens before the panel closed again. The hunt was about to begin. Team Alpha moved through the corridors of Prometheus with practiced efficiency, their weapons sweeping left and right as they advanced toward the bridge. The ship's layout was unlike anything in Kethvar military databases. Corridors that branched and merged in seemingly random patterns, emergency bulkheads that appeared to have been deliberately modified, and walls that seemed to shift when observed in peripheral vision. "These humans had some strange design philosophies," muttered Specialist Zeknor, his scanner beeping softly as he checked for structural weaknesses. "This corridor layout makes no tactical sense." Commander Vextai was beginning to share that assessment. They had been moving for 20 minutes and should have reached the bridge by now. But every turn seemed to lead to another identical passage. The ship's internal navigation system was either completely offline or deliberately scrambled. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "I'm having trouble maintaining contact with the other teams. The ship's hull seems to be interfering with our signals." "Switch to emergency frequencies," Vextai ordered, though he felt a growing sense of unease. Human ships weren't supposed to be able to block Kethvar communications. Their technology was advanced, but not that advanced. They rounded another corner and found themselves facing a sealed blast door. The metal surface was covered in scratches and dents, as if something had been trying to claw its way through from the other side. Warning signs in human script were painted across the surface in what appeared to be dried blood. "Can you read it?" Vextai asked his intelligence specialist. "Partially, sir. It appears to say quarantine level 7 and something about biological containment. The rest is too damaged to make out." Vextai felt his breathing slits constrict. The intelligence briefings had never mentioned anything about biological weapons aboard human vessels. But then again, the humans had a disturbing tendency to keep their most effective weapons classified until it was too late. "Breach the door," he ordered. "Maintain full environmental seals." The engineer's plasma cutter made quick work of the locking mechanism. The blast door slid aside with a grinding sound of damaged machinery, revealing a corridor that was markedly different from the others they had seen. This one was wider, with higher ceilings, and the walls were lined with what appeared to be observation windows. "Medical bay," the intelligence specialist observed, "or possibly a research facility." They moved forward cautiously, their lights revealing glimpses of the rooms beyond the windows. Operating tables, equipment that might have been surgical instruments, and containers filled with liquids that glow with an unsettling phosphorescence. In one room, they could see what appeared to be a human body on an examination table, perfectly preserved in the vacuum of space. "Commander," one of the warriors called out, "we have a problem." Vextai turned to see the warrior pointing at the floor. There, clearly visible in the thin layer of dust that had accumulated in the corridor, was a series of footprints, fresh footprints, leading deeper into the ship. "Impossible," Vextai breathed. "The ship has been dead for months." "Sir," the communications officer's voice was tight with controlled panic. "I'm receiving a transmission from Team Beta. They're reporting casualties." Vextai activated his comm unit. "Beta team, report." The response came back filled with static and what sounded like weapons fire. "Commander, under attack. Not possible. They're supposed to be dead." The transmission cut to silence. "All teams, fall back to the shuttle," Vextai ordered, but his communications officer was already shaking his head. "Sir, I can't raise the shuttle. All external communications are being jammed." Before Vextai could respond, the lights in the corridor went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in a hellish red glow. And in that red light, they could see that the footprints in the dust were no longer alone. Fresh prints were appearing, as if made by invisible feet, leading directly toward their position. "Weapons up," Vextai commanded, his pulse rifle charging with a high-pitched whine. Defensive formation. The footprints stopped just outside the range of their lights. For a moment, there was complete silence except for the sound of their own breathing and the distant hum of the ship's emergency systems. Then, from somewhere in the darkness ahead, came a sound that made every warrior's blood run cold. Laughter. Human laughter. "You came looking for a dead ship," a voice said from the darkness. The words were spoken in perfect Kethvar, but with an accent that was unmistakably human. "Congratulations. You found one." A figure stepped into the light, and Vextai felt his grip tighten on his weapon. It was human, wearing a tattered uniform that had once been pristine military dress. But there was something wrong with the figure's movements, something that suggested it was operating on will alone rather than any conventional understanding of life. "Captain Sarah Chun," Vextai said, recognizing the face from countless intelligence briefings. "You're supposed to be dead." "I am dead," Chin replied, her voice carrying an odd, hollow quality. "We all are, has been for months. But we're still here and we're still fighting." More figures emerged from the darkness. Human crew members, all wearing the same tattered uniforms, all moving with that same unsettling gait. Their eyes reflected the red emergency lighting like mirrors, and when they smiled, their teeth seemed far too sharp. "You see," Chin continued, "we had a choice when your plasma cannon tore through our hull. We could die like civilized beings, or we could make a deal, turn our deaths into something useful." "What kind of deal?" Vextai asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. "The kind that lets us keep fighting even after our hearts stop beating. The kind that turns a dead ship into a trap." Chen's smile widened. "The kind that ensures no alien boarding party ever makes it back to tell the tale." The human crew began to advance, and Vextai realized with growing horror that their feet made no sound on the metal deck. They moved like ghosts, like nightmares, like something that should not exist in any rational universe. "Open fire," he screamed. The corridor erupted in pulse rifle fire, energy bolts lighting up the darkness. But the shots passed through the advancing humans without effect, as if they were firing at smoke. And still the crew of the Prometheus kept coming, their hollow laughter echoing off the walls. Vextai realized, with the clarity that comes only in moments of absolute terror, that they hadn't boarded a dead ship at all. They had walked willingly into something far worse than death. They had entered a tomb that still knew how to fight. The pulse rifle fire was having no effect. Vextai watched in horror as the energy bolts passed harmlessly through the advancing human crew, their ghostly forms wavering but never stopping. Captain Chin walked to the front of the group, her dead eyes fixed on the Kethvar warriors with predatory intensity. "Fall back," Vextai shouted, but even as he gave the order, He realized there was nowhere to go. The blast door behind him had sealed itself, and the corridor ahead was filled with the walking dead. "Commander!" His intelligence specialist gasped. "This is impossible. The dead cannot." His words were cut off as Captain Chen reached him. She passed through his energy shield as if it were made of paper, her hand closing around his throat. The specialist's scream echoed to the corridor as his body began to convulse, his life force visibly draining away. "Run," Chen whispered, her voice carrying to every corner of the corridor despite speaking barely above a breath. "It's so much more fun when you run." Vextai didn't need to be told twice. He activated his suit's emergency thrusters, launching himself toward a maintenance hatch he had spotted earlier. Behind him, his warriors scattered in panic, their disciplined formation dissolving into chaos as the dead crew of the Prometheus fell upon them. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for his bulky frame, but terror gave him strength. He crawled frantically through the cramped space, his suit's lights revealing a maze of pipes and cables that seemed to pulse with their own malevolent life. Behind him, he could hear the screams of his warriors being cut short, one by one. He emerged into what appeared to be an engineering section, massive machines humming around him despite the ship's supposedly dead status. The air here was thick and oppressive, filled with the smell of ozone and something else, something organic and wrong. "Commander Vextai," a voice called from the shadows. "We've been waiting for you." He spun around to see a human engineer emerge from behind a massive reactor housing. Unlike the others, this one looked almost normal, except for the fact that half his skull was missing and his remaining eye glowed with an unnatural light. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb. The figure introduced himself. "I died when the plasma cannon hit our engineering section. Took most of my crew with me, but we couldn't leave our posts. The ship still needed us." Vextai raised his weapon, but Webb raised his hand in a gesture of peace. "Your weapon won't work here," Webb explained. "This is engineering. We control the power systems. Your pulse rifle is just an expensive club now." To Vextai's horror, he realized the human was right. His weapon's power indicator was dropping rapidly, its energy being drained by some invisible force. "What do you want?" Vextai demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The same thing we've always wanted," Webb replied. "To serve our ship, to protect humanity, to make sure our enemies never live to threaten our people again." He gestured to the machinery around them. "We've been busy since we died, improving things, making modifications. This ship isn't just dead, it's evolved. It's become something new, something that can turn death itself into a weapon." As if to demonstrate, Webb touched the control panel. The lights in the engineering section shifted from red to a sickly green, and Vextai felt his environmental suit begin to fail. The life support systems were being systematically shut down, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he could feel something else being pumped into the air, something that made his skin crawl, his mind filled with whispers he couldn't quite understand. "You see," Webb continued, "we discovered something interesting when we died. Death isn't the end for humans. It's just another state of being, another tool to be used in the service of our species." Vextai tried to run, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. The green light was affecting him, changing him, and he could feel his consciousness beginning to fragment. "No," he gasped. "This is impossible. The dead cannot." "Cannot what?" Webb asked. "Cannot think? Cannot plan? Cannot hate?" He laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You're about to learn just how wrong you are." Meanwhile, in another section of the ship, the remnants of Team Gamma had barricaded themselves in what appeared to be a storage bay. 5 warriors remained of the original 10, their weapons trained on the sealed door as they listened to the sounds of their teammates dying elsewhere in the ship. "This is madness," whispered Specialist Koltar, his mandibles clicking with terror. The intelligence report said nothing about this. Nothing about the dead walking or ships that eat their crews. "Quiet," hissed Subcommander Krixta, who had been leading the team. "We need to think. There has to be a way out of this." But even as he spoke, they could hear something moving in the ventilation system above them, something that scraped and whispered, and sounded like it was trying to remember how to use vocal cords. Sir, one of the warriors called out, the hull plating is changing. Krixta turned to see that the warrior was right. The metal walls around them were shifting, flowing like liquid, forming new patterns and shapes. And in those patterns he could see faces, human faces, twisted in expressions of pain and rage. Welcome to Prometheus. The faces said in unison. Population, 437. All present and accounted for. The sealed door began to melt, its metal running like water. Beyond it, they could see the rest of the ship's crew waiting for them. All of them. Every single human who had died when the plasma cannon struck, all of them standing together in the corridor, their dead eyes reflecting the flickering lights. We told you, Captain Chen said, stepping forward. None of you would make it back. We meant it. Krixta realized with crystal clarity that they had made a fundamental mistake. They had thought they were boarding a dead ship, but the Prometheus wasn't dead. It was something far worse than death. It was a ship that had transcended mortality itself, becoming something that existed solely to destroy its enemies, and they had walked right into its embrace. The last thing Krixta saw was Captain Chen smile as the crew of Prometheus closed in around them. Her teeth were indeed sharp, but it was the intelligence in her dead eyes that terrified him most. Even in death, humans refused to surrender. The bridge of Prometheus was a cathedral of death and defiance. Captain Saracen stood at the center of it all, her hands resting on a command console that pulsed with organic light. Around her, the bridge crew sat at their stations, their bodies motionless but their eyes tracking the movements of the surviving Kevvar warriors through the ship's internal sensors. Status report, Chen commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never let death interfere with duty. All boarding parties neutralized except for Commander Vextai, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Morrison. Half of his face was gone, revealing the skull beneath, but his remaining eye burned with fierce intelligence. He's been converted. The engineering section is processing him now. Chen nodded with satisfaction. The conversion process was still experimental, but it had proven remarkably effective. The Kevvar commander's memories and knowledge would be invaluable, and his transformed state would make him the perfect weapon against his own people. What about their ship? She asked. Still maintaining position, answered her sensor officer. They're trying to raise their boarding party, but we're jamming all communications. They'll wait another hour before investigating. Chen smiled, an expression that looked wrong on her dead features. Perfect. That gives us time to prepare our gift. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. Gentlemen, we have an opportunity. The Kevvar destroyer out there represents everything we died fighting against, everything we refused to let threaten humanity. Today, we finish what we started. The crew responded with a unified nod, their movements synchronized in a way that would have been impossible when they were alive. Death had connected them, made them part of something larger than individual consciousness. Engineering, Chen called out. Status on our new friend? Chief Engineer Webb's voice came through the comm system, distorted but clear. Conversion complete, Captain. Commander Vextai is ready for deployment. On the main screen, they could see the Kevvar commander standing in the engineering section. He looked the same as before, but his eyes now held the same hollow intelligence as the human crew. His mind had been stripped of everything except the desire to serve the Prometheus and destroy his former comrades. Excellent, Chen said. Send him to the shuttle bay. It's time for him to go home. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Vextai would return to his ship, reporting that the Prometheus was indeed a dead hulk ready for salvage. He would recommend bringing the entire crew aboard for a thorough search, and once they were inside, the real harvest would begin. Captain, her communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Chen frowned. Earth Command had been notified of the Prometheus's destruction months ago. Why would they be trying to contact a dead ship? Put it through, she ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at Admiral Harrison, the man who had sent them on their final mission. His face was grave, his eyes haunted by the weight of command during wartime. Prometheus, this is Admiral Harrison. I know you're out there. I know what you become. The bridge crew exchanged glances. This was unexpected. We've been monitoring unusual energy signatures in your sector, Harrison continued. Signatures that match theoretical models for postmortem consciousness transfer. If you're receiving this, it means our worst fears have been confirmed. Chun felt a flicker of something that might have been fear. How could Earth Command know about their transformation? I'm ordering you to stand down, Harrison said. Return to Earth immediately for debriefing and evaluation. This is not a request. Belay that order, Chin said coldly. We have a mission to complete. But Harrison couldn't hear her response. This was a one-way transmission, probably sent as a standard signal to any ship in the sector. If you refuse to comply, Harrison continued, we will be forced to take more direct action. The Prometheus project was never supposed to become operational. It was meant to be a theoretical study, nothing more. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Project? Morrison asked. What project? Chen's dead heart would have been racing if it still beat. Memories were surfacing, memories that had been buried beneath the trauma of their deaths. The experimental procedures they had undergone before their final mission. The routine medical examinations that had felt anything but routine. The strange dreams and the growing sense of connection between crew members. We were experiments, she whispered. They did this to us before we died. The transformation was already in place, waiting for the right trigger. The implications were staggering. Their deaths hadn't caused their transformation. They had simply activated it. Earth Command had deliberately created a crew of potential undead soldiers, and the Prometheus had been their testing ground. Sir, the sensor officer reported, we're detecting multiple ships approaching our position. Earth fleet signatures. Chen's expression hardened. How many? 12 vessels. Dreadnought class. They'll be here in 4 hours. Chen stood silent for a moment, processing this betrayal. They had died for humanity, had transformed themselves into something beyond death to continue serving their species, and now Earth Command was coming to destroy them. Well, she said finally, I suppose we'll have to give them a proper welcome. She turned to her crew. All stations, prepare for combat. We're going to show Earth Command what happens when they try to dispose of their own weapons. Captain, Morrison said carefully, they're our own people. They're human. Are they? Chen asked. They created us as weapons and then tried to throw us away when we became inconvenient. They're not our people anymore. They're just another enemy. The crew began working with renewed purpose, their dead hands flying over controls as they prepared the Prometheus for its final battle. Around them, the ship itself seemed to respond to their anger, its walls pulsing with renewed energy. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the Kethvar destroyer is moving to investigate our position. They must have detected the Earth fleet. Chen smiled again, this time with genuine warmth. Perfect. Let them come. We'll deal with both threats at once. She opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. We are about to face our greatest challenge. The very people who created us are coming to destroy us, and they're bringing friends. But we are the crew of the Prometheus. We do not yield. We do not surrender. And we do not forgive. The response from throughout the ship was immediate and unanimous. 437 voices, all speaking in perfect unison. Aye, Captain. We stand ready. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the approaching storm. But the Prometheus and her crew were ready for whatever came next. Death had made them stronger. Betrayal had made them angry. And anger was a weapon they knew how to use. The Prometheus hung in space like a predator coiled to strike. Around her, the vacuum blaze of the engine flares of approaching warships. 12 Earth dreadnoughts closing from one direction, the Kethvar destroyer cautiously advancing from another. Captain Chin stood on her bridge, surrounded by the dead crew who had become something far more dangerous than they had ever been in life. Earth fleet will be in weapons range in 30 minutes, reported Lieutenant Morrison, his skeletal fingers dancing across the tactical display. The Kethvar ship is holding position 2 kilometers off our starboard bow. Chin nodded, her mind calculating possibilities with a cold precision that only the dead could achieve. The approaching Earth ships represented the ultimate betrayal. The The government that had created them as weapons was now coming to destroy them as monsters. But betrayal was nothing new to the crew of the Prometheus. They had been betrayed by death itself, and they had turned that betrayal into strength. "Open a channel to the Kethvar ship," she ordered. The main screen flickered, revealing the bridge of the enemy destroyer. Commander Vextai stood at attention, his four eyes now hollow and reflecting the same unnatural light as the human crew. The conversion process had been complete. He was theirs now, body and soul. "Commander," Chin said, "are you ready to welcome your people aboard?" "Yes, Captain," Vextai replied, his voice carrying the monotone quality of the converted. "They trust me. They will come." "Good. Proceed with the plan." The screen went dark, and Chin turned her attention to the approaching Earth fleet. Admiral Harrison's ships were arranged in a perfect attack formation, their weapons charging for what they undoubtedly expected to be a quick execution. They had created the ultimate weapon, and now feared what they had wrought. "Incoming transmission from the fleet commander," her communications officer announced. "Put it through," Chin ordered. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the screen, older than she remembered and marked by the weight of terrible decisions. When he saw her, his expression shifted from military authority to something approaching grief. "Sarah," he said quietly, "my God, what have we done to you?" "You created me," Chin replied. "You and your scientists and your secret projects. You turned my crew into potential weapons and then sent us out to die so you could see what would happen." Harrison's face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The consciousness transfer technology was meant to preserve military knowledge, not create this. Chun stepped closer to the screen. "This is what happens when you try to weaponize the human spirit. Admiral, you get something that refuses to die, refuses to surrender, and refuses to forgive. Stand down, Sarah. Let us help you. Let us try to find a way to reverse what's happened." Chun laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Reverse it? Why would we want to do that? We're more effective now than we ever were in life. We're everything you wanted us to be." She gestured to her crew. "We feel no pain, no fear, no hesitation. We are the perfect soldiers. Admiral, you're perfect soldiers." "Sir," Morrison interrupted, "the Kethvar crew is transferring to our ship. Full crew complement. 300 aliens total." Chin smiled. "And there's the first demonstration of our effectiveness." On the tactical display, they could see the Kethvar destroyer's crew shuttling across to Prometheus. They were coming eagerly, trusting their converted commander, believing they were about to claim a prize. Instead, they were walking into a trap that would turn them into weapons against their own people. "Sarah, please," Harrison said. "Don't do this. They're not your enemies." "Aren't they?" Chin asked. "They've been trying to destroy humanity for 3 years. They've killed thousands of our people, and now they're about to become our allies in the fight against you." "Against us?" "Sarah, we're on the same side." "No, Admiral. We were on the same side. Past tense. You made us into weapons and then tried to dispose of us when we became inconvenient. You're not our allies. You're our creators, and creators can be replaced." The conversion process was already beginning throughout the ship. 300 Kethvar warriors were being transformed into something new, something that would serve Prometheus and her crew with absolute loyalty. It was a process that had been perfected through months of experimentation, and it was remarkably efficient. "Fleet weapons are charging," Morrison reported. "They're preparing to fire." Chin nodded. "Engineering, bring us to full power. All hands, prepare for combat." The Prometheus came alive around them, her systems humming with power that seemed to come from the crew themselves. Death had changed them, connected them to their ship in ways that living beings could never achieve. They were no longer just a crew. They were components of a single, unified weapon. "Tactical, target the lead dreadnought," Chin ordered. "Let's show them what their creation can do." The ship's weapon systems responded with devastating efficiency. Plasma cannons that had been modified beyond recognition opened fire, their beams cutting through space with lethal precision. The lead Earth ship's shields flared and collapsed, its hull splitting open like a rotten fruit. "My God," Harrison whispered. "How are you doing this? Your weapons weren't that powerful. We improved them, Chin replied. We had time to think, to plan, to modify. Death is very educational, Admiral. The battle was brief and decisive. The Earth fleet, expecting to face a damaged ship with a traumatized crew, instead found themselves fighting something that existed beyond the normal rules of warfare. The Prometheus moved like a living thing, her weapons firing with impossible accuracy, her shields adapting to every attack. Within an hour, 11 of the 12 Earth ships were destroyed. The last one, Admiral Harrison's flagship, hung crippled in space, its engines dead and its weapons offline. Surrender, Chim broadcast the surviving ship, and we'll make your transformation quick and painless. Never, Harrison replied. I won't let you turn my people into monsters. You already did that, Chin said. We're just finishing the job. The final Earth ship exploded in a flash of light that briefly outshone the local star. When the glare faded, only the Prometheus remained, surrounded by debris in the silence of space. Captain, Morrison reported, conversion of the Kethvar crew is complete. We now have 537 souls aboard. Chin nodded with satisfaction. Set course for Earth. It's time to go home. As the Prometheus turned toward the heart of human space, her crew began planning their next move. They had been created as weapons, betrayed by their makers and abandoned to die. But death had only made them stronger, more focused, more determined to complete their mission. They were the perfect soldiers, and they had work to do. Behind them, the wreckage of 2 fleets drifted in the void, a monument to the folly of trying to control forces beyond human understanding. The dead crew of the Prometheus had learned the most important lesson of all. Something should never be allowed to die, and humanity's refusal to surrender was one of them. The Prometheus disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying her crew of the converted dead toward a destiny that would reshape the galaxy forever. They had been created as weapons, but they had become something far more dangerous. They had become hope itself, twisted into a form that their enemies would never expect, and their creators would never be able to control. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. End of story.